God won't give you more than you can handle. Have you ever heard that before? Well, spoiler, it's actually 100% inaccurate, and we're gonna get into it. God won't give you more than you can handle. Have you ever heard that before? If you have, then let us know down in the comments below. Maybe even give us a like. It's a really common phrase. We love it in our Christian bookstores, on our bumper stickers, and on our mugs. Speaking of mugs, hit up the digital notes down below in the description and submit your answer to see if you can figure out how many mugs are here on set right now. And hey, for extra credit, go back through all 4 videos on our playlist, which is linked right here at the top of the screen, and tally up all the different mugs that you see on set. Good luck. But ironically speaking, the phrase, God won't give you more than you can handle, that's not biblical. The correct verse that the phrase is attempting to reference comes from 1 Corinthians 10, verse 13, which says, "No temptation has seized you except what is common to man, and God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear." Paul, who wrote that verse, actually writes another verse for us in 2 Corinthians 12, which says, "My grace is sufficient for you, my power made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me." We as humans, we're actually meant to be given more than we can handle. If you've ever felt in over your head on any situation, then give us a like. And that way you can see, based on the likes, that you're not alone here on this channel. And subscribe, because this channel is a safe place for you to explore and navigate difficult things in life. Jesus actually talks to us about that exact topic. That's been the entire focus of this entire video playlist. How do we respond when bad things happen? Because bad things are going to happen, and in many cases it's gonna be more than we can handle. So bad things happen. We're very aware of that, and in this video we're gonna dive deep into the claims of Jesus that come to us from John chapter 16. You can follow along in the digital notes linked down below, where he's predicting about bad things that are gonna happen, and we can know that it's going to be difficult. Let's talk about walls. When's the last time you thought about the walls in your house? Odds are, unless you've painted them recently or kicked them in accidentally, or maybe on purpose, then you haven't probably given much thought to the walls in your house. Like, think about it, in your bedroom, you're probably pretty glad that your walls are there. They give you security and they give you privacy. But sometimes in life, we find ourselves run into a wall. Not necessarily real walls, though that could be true. I mean like psychological or even like mental walls. Maybe we call them things like hurdles or blocks or difficulties or trials, things that are more than we can handle. We're going to explore a real famous phrase and verse that you, if you've grown up in church, have heard Jesus say before. But to set the table a little bit so you know why he said it, when he said it, and what caused him to say it, Jesus and his disciples are in the midst of his Last Supper right before the crucifixion. And he just had got done explaining to them out of a famous passage, you've maybe heard it before in John 15, about the vine in the branches. And then Jesus goes on into what Christians call his high priestly prayer, which is just church language for one of Jesus's final recorded public prayers that he's giving to God the Father. But right in between these two passages, right, is a really interesting verse. And here's what it says, John 16, verse 33. If you've heard it before, you owe us a like. And it says, "I have told you all of this so that you may have peace in me. Here on earth, you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart, because I have overcome the world." See, as Christians, we love this verse. It's a good mug verse, right? It's hope-filled and it's real, but it doesn't shy away from the difficulties of life either. It explains that there is going to be difficulty, but it also gives us a place to find and place our hope. You know, it reminds me of a verse in Hebrews chapter 6, where the writer says, "This hope is strong and a trustworthy anchor for our souls. It leads us through the curtain into God's inner sanctuary." This hope is a hope that's out in front of us. It's before us. It's one that we can see. It's on into the future of our time with Jesus. And all of this is possible because of what Jesus did for us on the cross. In fact, in Matthew chapter 27, it's real detailed. You can follow along in the digital notes, but it says, at noon, darkness fell across the whole land until 3 o'clock. And then at 3 o'clock, Jesus called out in a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? And some of the bystanders, they misunderstood, and they thought that Jesus was actually calling for the prophet Elijah. Verse 48 says, one of them ran and they filled a sponge with sour wine and they held it up to him on a reeded stick so that he could drink. But then the rest said, wait, let's see whether Elijah comes to save him or not. And then verse 50, Jesus shouted out again and he released his spirit. And at that moment, the curtain in the sanctuary of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, rocks split apart, tombs opened. The bodies of godly men and women who had died before were raised from the dead. They left the cemetery after Jesus' resurrection. They went into the holy city of Jerusalem and they appeared to many people. And in verse 54, the Roman officer and the other soldiers at the crucifixion were terrified by the earthquake and all that had happened. And then they said, this man, he must be the Son of God. Now, if you've grown up in or around church, you've probably heard some account of this passage before. But why do I read it to you today? Because it gives us two reminders, two anchors of hope when we're up against the wall and we don't know where to go and we don't know where to turn. So, when we're facing the troubles that Jesus promises us we're going to face in John 16, the cross reminds us of this. Number one, God loves us. Look back at Matthew 27:50. It says, then Jesus shouted out again and he released his spirit. There's a book titled, What is the Gospel? And it has an amazing quote in it, and I just want to share it with you. It's going to be up here on screen. It says, the Bible teaches us that humanity's fundamental problem, the thing from which we all need saved, is not meaningless or disintegration in our lives or even the debilitating sense of guilt. See, these are merely symptoms of a deeper and much more profound problem. Our deepest problem is our sin. We must understand that the predicament that we're in is a predicament of our own making. See, all of us humans have disobeyed. We ignored God's commands. We sinned against him. Can you imagine? Even to begin to imagine what that means, to stand before God, to have no explanation, no plea, no excuse, no case. So what does it mean to be held accountable to God? The Bible is very clear. God is righteous and holy, and therefore he's not going to excuse sin. But what will it mean for God to deal with sin, to judge it and to punish it? See, we need rescuing from our sin. The condition of our hearts as humans is so bad. The situation that we face in this life is only a symptom of the brokenness that we have in this world. But the foundational issue all of us must come to terms with is the fact that we all have sinned. Look it up in Romans 3:23. And so the cross reminds us that God went to an incredible, ridiculous length to prove his love for you. So that when you face hard times, your deepest need as a human being has been met. There are no lengths to which God did not draw himself to you. Think about it like this. Pretend you have a giant anthill outside your house, right? And you've come to grow to love that anthill. And you look at that anthill every day and you start to study it, and you even begin to know the difference between what the ants looked like. And so you get to know their names and their stories, and then one day you come to a stark realization that they're gonna die. And nothing that these ants can do is ever going to help themselves. And the only way to save the ants is for you to miraculously become an ant yourself and go live with them. If you love them enough, would you become an ant? I mean, probably not, even if it were somehow miraculously possible. And I know it's a silly example, but that's exactly what Jesus did for us. That's what he did for you, and that's what he did for me. And so when your life is being rocked by the broken and messiness of this world, look to the cross. God loves you, and that love supersedes whatever wall you might be facing. The second thing that the cross reminds us is that God maintains control. It says this, it says, at that moment, the curtain in the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook and rocks split apart and tombs were open, and the bodies of many godly men and women who had died, they were raised from the dead. They left the cemetery after Jesus' resurrection, and then they went all throughout the holy city of Jerusalem, and they appeared to many people. Now, if the cross is a reminder that God's in control, this passage seems like a far cry from control, doesn't it? There's dead guys walking around Jerusalem, earthquakes, rocks splitting in two. Guys, I want you to not miss this. God wasn't absent. In fact, God had a master plan, and this was all a part of it. And I know your situation feels out of control at times. And at this moment, right here, what we just read, there are actually two kind of like overlapping realities at play. And not to get too nerdy or niche on you, but how many of you have ever seen the first season of the show Stranger Things, right? In Stranger Things, there's a world, and we all know it, and we're all comfortable with it, and everything in there is good and healthy, and we'd call that normal. You know, there's actually a Hebrew word known as shalom, which explains that everything is as God intended. Shalom is what we see back in Genesis in the Garden of Eden. Others may describe it as God's kingdom, but all of a sudden, some strange things, hence the name, right, begin to start happening. And this upside down, this spiritual realm, this corrupted by death and decay and brokenness begins to invade the normal life of shalom, of this shalom, God's kingdom reality. And this is like a metaphor, right, of the earth that's been corrupted by sin. You see, Jesus wanted to bring the world back to its normal shalom state and rescue us out of the upside down that we've all been forced to be living in by the sin that we were born into and the sin that we have committed. And so the cross reminds us that He's in control, right? He gives us an exit out of the upside down back into His kingdom. And one day that's going to be a permanent reality for us. And one day He's going to permanently close that Stranger Things gate and kill the domain of darkness. But the problem for you and I right now in our lives is that we're living in these two overlapping realities. See, sometimes we see the glimpses of the spiritual kingdom and we get to live into that shalom, but then other times we see the difficulty and the pain that comes along with the upside down. You are living in the broken world. And our prayer needs to be, God, listen, I choose to believe in You more than this or more than that tragedy or more than the wall I'm facing. And I throw myself in utter dependence on You because I can't get out of it on my own. When we face hard times, we need to throw ourselves into utter dependence on God. And I get it. That's one of those phrases that's easier said than done, right? But Jesus going to the cross was a reminder to all of us about the hope that we have, and that hope is rooted in Him and the fact that He is in fact in control. This is why I created this little free downloadable cell phone background. Hit it up in the digital notes. You can grab it, download it, and set it as your phone background so that you can be reminded when you're facing the wall that you have hope and you can throw yourself in utter dependence on God. It's also why we're commanded to take the Lord's Supper, which we talked about extensively, and the reason why we do it in this video linked down below in the show notes. Check that out if you'd like to take a deeper dive into why we do the Lord's Supper. But it's important to be reminded of what He did. That's what the cross is. It serves as a reminder that we can in fact depend on God, and we can throw ourselves into utter dependence on Him. And you might be watching this thinking like, I've never gone into utter dependence on God. And while Jesus was on the cross and caused the whole world to be thrown into utter chaos, that chaos happened so that you and me could have a path back to right relationship with God, out of the upside down and into His kingdom. One day it's going to be restored, and we can be reminded of the fact that Jesus has, in fact, overcome the world. And so if you're ready to jump into that relationship with God, then the video linked right here on the screen will help you take that next step. And we'll catch you over there in the next video.